Hello and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest. July 17th, 2025, the MAGA's Epstein Obsession Edition. I'm David Plotz of CityCast. If there is a little bump in my voice, a little perk in my voice, a little joy in my voice, and in my loins, possibly, I'm giddy. I'm giddy because I've been very, very lonely the last couple of weeks, like a dog left alone at home for too long. I forgot what John smells like, but we're all back together.
Oh my goodness!
Thank goodness.
By the way, did you see that that they did that study of dogs that can determine whether their Parkinson's owners are about to have a collapse, and they have like 80% to 95% accuracy in picking those out. So dogs and their noses. There you go.
Dogs and their noses. That was John Dickerson, co-anchor of the CBS Evening News, anchor of CBS Evening News Plus from New York City. Missed you, John. Hello.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be back. Hello, Emily, David, and to all of you out there in Radio Land.
And then from the New York Times Magazine and Yale University Law School, Emily Bazelon. Hello, Emily. Missed you too.
I am so glad to be here with both of you.
This week on the Gabfest, can Trump shut down the Epstein conspiracists? Then why is the Supreme Court rubber stamping Trump's disassembly of the federal government? Will anything constrain the court from going along with what Trump is doing? Then will rescission kill off NPR and PBS? Plus, we will have cocktail chatter. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise.
Juguemos a Adivina el Precio de Burlington. El regreso escolar significa volver a ahorrar. Traemos jeans para tus niños desde, un momento, solo $11.99. Burlington pasa el examen. ¿Y qué tal las mochilas con personajes? Las tenemos desde $12.99. Burlington lo ha vuelto a hacer. ¿Y los tenis para niños? Marcas de primera y a la última moda desde $11.99. Ya puedes ahorrar. Burlington, marcas rebajas, wow. Los estilos y selección varían por tienda.
So the Epstein conspiracy, what is it, Emily? Why has it gripped so much of MAGA world for the last several years?
Jeffrey Epstein is this very notorious sex offender who was abusing many girls, potentially, many people on his kind of island estate. And there are various famous names that have gotten caught up in this utter scandal. It went on for a long time. He only served about 18 months in prison for his offenses. And it's a really terrible, sordid story of mistreatment. And it has always seemed to loom far beyond Jeffrey Epstein because he had all these famous contacts, because it went on for a long time and involved so many girls and young women. And then, of course, he committed suicide, supposedly, in jail in Manhattan. And it has lent itself to this belief, which is understandable, that there's more to the story than we know, that perhaps his death was not really a suicide and was covered up in some way to protect other powerful people. And it really fits into the idea that there is a shadowy cabal of elite, incredibly immoral, dangerous individuals who are controlling the world and getting away with terrible sins and crimes. So that, to me, is the Jeffrey Epstein affair in a nutshell.
And John, it migrates into MAGA. So MAGA becomes obsessed with this issue because it, as Emily says, shadowy, elite, cabal, child sex abuse. This all maps onto QAnon and maps onto a worldview of a kind of anti-elite populist worldview. And Trump gets into office, and then what happens?
Yeah, I've been thinking a great deal about the piece that Ben Sasse, the former Nebraska senator, wrote in The Atlantic in 2021, saying QAnon is destroying the GOP from within. He was talking about another kind of GOP that, in fact, has been wholly replaced by Donald Trump. So he wasn't exactly right, but it does seem like this is the moment that, in fact, he was suggesting, which is that the after stoking these conspiracy theories Donald Trump and those people who are now in his cabinet, not, most notably the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi, the attorney general, they now have to deal with what they've created. And unlike many of the other instances in which Donald Trump has been able to just basically change the narrative and the rules and keep his supporters following him, this is one where it hasn't happened. So the Justice Department, Pam Bondi, issued essentially a nothing to see here report after having claimed that she had Epstein's client list on her desk. And there has been internal and external debate over this, most notably from the influencer core of MAGA world, which has lesser characters you haven't heard of, but also very familiar ones like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, who have criticized Pam Bondi and the president indirectly, and aired some of the other parts of the conspiracy theory, which include the idea that Epstein was funded by Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, and I'm pausing because I have difficulty following the bouncing ball, but essentially in a scheme that created these conditions where powerful American elites in the shadowy deep state went to his island, engaged in activities with these I assume young women, were videotaped, and then that was used as blackmail to support Israel, which is kind of the furthest reaches of this, except that Tucker Carlson has aired that. After the nothing to see here announcement from the Attorney General, the number 2 at the FBI, Dan Bongino, who was a influencer podcaster who promoted the Epstein conspiracy, has had a split of some sort with the Attorney General. I'm not sure the exact nature of that split right now. But finally, the president, who's been asked about this repeatedly, has now started saying that the members of his base who believe in this and who care about it and who want to see more from the White House and the administration are weaklings and are taking the bait from the Democrats. Final point I would make is that where this seemed to jump into a new realm is when the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is not broken with the president on anything, as far as I can tell, suggested all the information needed to come out about Epstein, which would be his most public break with the president by a long shot.
Can I say one more thing about the facts? I mean, I understand why you've brought up QAnon, because this child sex abuse ring scandal comparison. But it is also true that this is a real thing that happened.
100%.
And right. And also this Epstein's death in jail, there's at least a minute. And according to Wired, there are 3 minutes missing from the tape. So there is a big question here about what exactly happened to him.
You're totally right. It's the Mossad and also the connection to the Pizzagate attack that to me puts this in the QAnon camp. But you're 100% right, Emily. And you definitely know one doesn't want to diminish the actual both conspiracy, because Epstein protected himself through his money and elite contacts.
Right. And the Mossad part seems to be made up, but Ron Wyden, who's a Democrat in the Senate, is looking into the financing for Epstein through some super rich people. So that part of it maybe has more legs. I don't know.
Trump is all over Epstein's history. Trump and Epstein were friends for a while, although Trump seems to have broken with him. That's one problem for Trump. Another problem is that, of course, when you are running a campaign based on conspiracy, a conspiracy of elites, and then you become the elite, you become the controller of the flow of information, it becomes difficult to shut down a conspiracy theory, because now everyone just says, well, you're part of it. You're somehow implicated in it. And conspiracy people just will never be satisfied. This is an unfalsifiable situation. No matter what you say, everyone will say, well, no, it's because the shadowy elite has changed the data, has done whatever, has done X. So even if there's nothing there, and I have no idea if there's nothing there or not, people will never be satisfied. I think what to me is weird about the Epstein conspiracy is that it is the case, John, that Trump has put conspiracists in control in other places. The conspiracists have stopped research and vaccination. Vaccination is
Totally.
By far the most evidence-based bit of health in the history of Earth. The most cost-effective measure in history. And yet the conspiracists now basically run policy around this. And yet he's been able to do that very effectively. Yet he can't shut down the narrative around some rando dead, criminal who has been dead for 6 years.
When you pick loyalists and conspiracists and then also put them in your sort of informal cabinet, which I would put Laura Loomer, the conspiracy theorist who is responsible for getting some people bounced from the president's National Security Council, you run into the kind of internal problems he's having. And one of the tricky things about this story is that there have been so many instances of which people have said, Trump's going to disappoint MAGA, and a lot of it's wishful thinking among liberals, and sort of some confirmation bias. But this case does seem to really exist. This does seem to be an instance in which the president is out of step with these people who are influencers in his base, in some people who are in his own administration. I'm still, though, somewhat puzzled he has abandoned, and maybe there are connections here. He's essentially abandoned this part of MAGA on the swamp, right? The idea is that there's this is connected, Epstein is, to the swamp and the shadowy elites. But if you're worried about special interest influence in government, President Trump has professionalized that with his family and that doesn't seem to bother anybody. He has abandoned this group in part on his policy towards Ukraine, towards Iran. These same influencers who are worried about, or some of them, Carlson and Bannon, who are worried about Epstein, said there was going to be an absolute revolt by MAGA when if Trump intervened in Iran. There wasn't at all. And I wonder if there's some connection there. In other words, he has been able to do what he wants so far on foreign policy in a way that is against this base. So perhaps these are connected.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good point. I think that Trump's base is no longer primarily the fever swamp loons, but it's the power-seeking cynics. They're like the people who the people who are kind of most delighted by Trump now are the people who love power and money and have realized that the Trump administration is open for business. And like the disillusioned conspiracy theorists are not actually numerous enough to derail all the work that Trump is doing. There's all these people who want power and want actual kind of corrupt gains from the Trump administration, and they fall in line. Like to me, it was just really telling that Fox News, which knows which side of the bread it's buttered on, or whatever that metaphor is, that Fox News just stopped talking about Epstein when Trump said to stop talking about Epstein, because they thought it was like more important. They were more willing to serve power than to serve the crazies who have energy. So I don't know, Emily, do you think disillusioning the conspiracists is something that will actually cost Trump in the long run? Is it a problem that the lion now is trying to eat the lion tamer in a small way?
Well, I think yes. I'm going to argue yes, because these people have so much energy and they have also a big presence online in a way that can scare other people into complying in some ways. Now, I guess your Fox example cuts in the other direction, and obviously they're not the president. They don't have that kind of power. But I do wonder if over time Pam Bondi is going to find herself vulnerable, because she wasn't like a big figure in this world. The irony here is she has been, in my view, incredibly willing to do Trump's bidding in turning over the resources and the integrity of the Justice Department to him, and done all kinds of things he's asked for. But I think that now there's going to be pressure on her to do more, to do something to supplicate the people who are angry now. And that could be, unfortunately, like more revenge-based kind of investigations and prosecutions. We saw them this week, fire Maureen Comey, who's one of the lawyers who worked on the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was helped Epstein find girls. to abuse. And, Maureen Comey is the daughter of James Comey. And so like she could have done absolutely nothing wrong in her job. She successfully prosecuted Epstein and Maxwell, but she seems like kind of a sop. Firing her seems like a sop to this part of the base. And you can imagine other things like that Bondi could try to do to restore her standing, because eventually if people keep crying for her head, Trump may listen in some way.
I'm trying to categorize correctly some of the other things that connect to Donald Trump's skills and normal patterns, which is to say that this is a part of a larger plan that he has engaged in forever, which is undermining the authority of all institutions. So we saw him do it this week with the Fed, right? Things aren't going well on inflation for the moment, so continue attacking the Fed. But he's always attacked institutions in order to reduce their legitimacy so that he, as the author in the moment, can improvise whatever legitimacy he needs for himself, keeps himself at the center. There are no questioning authorities because they've all been diminished. And so Epstein and the deep state and this idea and plugging into the energy of the people who believe there is a pedophilic cabal, which, by the way, we should mention, there's as the theory goes, as I understand it, is that the pedophiles in their ring are going to be slayed by Donald Trump, that he is in fact the kind of one true champion who can pierce this darkness.
And he hung out with them for years because it was an long-term undercover op where he was just figuring out what they were up to.
Exactly. So the Epstein thing was a part of that general technique of his, which has been incredibly effective, which is to diminish the power of external institutions or external voices so that he is at the center. And then when he's at the center, he's able to just sort of improvise his way in and out of things. And this is a case where, for the moment, and who knows if it'll actually matter, his improvisational skills look as floundering as they did in his debate against Kamala Harris. I mean, when he was talking about how the Epstein files were really created by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, he was refrigerator poetrying seeking for a way to get out of this. And
Did you come up with that metaphor? Did you come up with refrigerator poetry? That is Trump's language. Did you just coin that on the spot?
I believe I did.
Oh my God!
The genius of John Dickerson at work. He was on vacation, but now he's back.
But when he, because then he talks about the Russian hoax and all this stuff, and it seemed really to be a floundering in a way that when you think about what else is happening in his world, things are going pretty well. I mean, Iran went well. NATO's calling him daddy. Inflation's up a little, but the markets are doing great by his determination. I realize the markets aren't the economy, but nevertheless, the way he sees it. So he must be feeling a sort of disconnect here that is part of this floundering that has been a part of his various comments on the Epstein thing. I
mean, the conspiracy theorists are not suddenly going to become rabid Democrats, and they're not going to animate some kind of left-wing movement. So I think they don't have a lot of places to go. They can go to throwing sticks at Trump a little bit, but they have no other home in American politics. So I'm not really worried about them disappearing forever.
We should add in here, by the way, that Mike Pence told CBS's Major Garrett that everything should be released in what was, clearly. I mean, Mike Pence doesn't have a lot of sway in the movement, but it was interesting to see him weighing in on this. But Mike Johnson is obviously attuned to the voters in the various districts that they need to keep control of the House. And so I wonder if, while the conspiracy theorists are certainly not going to go vote for Democrats, whether they need to be kept at a sufficient level of engagement for the off-year elections, and whether that's what's worrying him if they get disillusioned here.
Finally, on this, I don't see why they don't just release everything. Either everything has already been released, which is kind of what I suspect, like that everything is out there, or there's something really dark and troublesome from Trump in there.
Wait. There's a third possibility. There are a lot of things. They are sealed by the court. There's a lot of stuff that is sealed. Much of it is sealed to protect the people who made the accusations, and their identifying information is all over those files.
I know, but I don't see why the Trump folks care about it. They don't care about
No.
They don't care about docs. I know, but okay.
Like, they don't get to just be like, that's disobeying a court order. They still care about that in some contexts. So that's a lot of what's going on here. And according to Alan Dershowitz, who was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer and wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal this week.
Oh, God, that was so annoying, that thing he wrote.
But he did explain that, yes, there are names of people who've been accused of crimes or at least of misconduct connected with Epstein. And those names Dershowitz isn't allowed to disclose because of the documents are sealed. His op-ed in the Journal, I think, was meant to put to rest the idea that there's a lot new to see here, but it kind of didn't, because there is some information that the public doesn't know. And then I'm going to go back and bang my drum one more time about this missing 1 to 3 minutes of the tape in the jail.
Yes, that part does seem suspect.
I too would like to know why they cut that tape.
Do you guys feel, last quick question, that in a month, this is going to be an issue that people are still talking about, that still has any kind of pull either within MAGA or just in the public generally?
I mean, I guess they will keep talking about it because it's low 6 years later and they seem really into it. I mean, I think the other thing here, why is it this? And I'm going to steal something that I think I got from Michelle Goldberg, the New York Times columnist, which is that maybe this is about the idea that to believe in Trump is supposed to be about believing in some larger tale of heroism, right? That there is deep evil in the world and Trump is the savior who's going to root it out and save us all from it. And so this is a crucial plank in that conception of Trumpism and of MAGA, and that's why it keeps coming back in this way that he can't control.
And yet it's very, for the moment anyway, strange, in which it has all of this weird Swiss cheese quality to it, which is, on the one hand, he's the savior who's going to get rid of the pedophiles. On the other, he's photographed repeatedly with Jeffrey Epstein. If you use the conspiracy thinking, you'd think that might cause a minute of pause, but that never does. And here again, they're angry that this information isn't coming out, but the anger doesn't seem to be directly related to President Trump. It's like it's creating a hole for him, and I wonder what happens to that. Because obviously the president can get done what he wants to get done within his own administration. So when he says, well, Pam Bondi, that would seem to be not enough for the people who are anxious to see this stuff get published.
This episode of the Gabfest is brought to you by Smalls. Is your cat ready for a diet upgrade? Then you need Smalls cat food, named the best overall cat food by cats.com. Smalls cat food is packed with protein and made with preservative-free ingredients, giving your cat the high-quality meal they deserve, and it's delivered right to your door. After switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported noticeable improvements in their cat's overall health. And the team at Smalls is so confident your cat will love their product, you can try it completely risk-free. So what are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. For a limited time only, because you're a Gabfest listener, you can get 60% off your first Smalls order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/Gabfest. That's 60% off when you head to smalls.com/Gabfest plus free shipping. Again, that's smalls.com/Gabfest. This episode of the Gabfest is brought to you by Quince. If you're not big on trends, but big on clothes that feel good and last, you should check out Quince. Their lightweight layers and high-quality staples will easily become an everyday essential. That is absolutely true for me. So I was just rooting around my closet. Whole new look for me. I have these linen pants from Quince. They are so comfortable. They've become my lounge around the house pants. And I'm pairing it. I also got a linen shirt because it is beastly hot in Washington where I live. And my linen shirt, which is kind of a lovely tealish color, is so comfortable. And it has changed how I dress in the summer. It's awesome. Quince has all the things you actually want to wear on repeat. Breathable, flow knit polos, crisp cotton shirts, comfortable lightweight pants, a la my linen pants that work for both weekend hangs and dressed up dinners. And the best part is that everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. So stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/Gabfest for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Gabfest to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Gabfest. This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Bombas. Summer's here and we're all chasing something, a break, a goal, a vibe. Do not let bad socks and blisters ruin it. I am a Bombas socks evangelist. I'm a Bombas socks enthusiast. Every day I'm in my Bombas socks now. They're so comfortable. They have this incredible quality of being both cool and breathable, but also holding tight, gripping in all the right ways. And it makes all the kind of exercise I do in Bombas a pure joy. And Bombas doesn't stop at socks. Check out the fresh white tees, waterproof slides for the beach, and buttery soft sweat-wicking underwear for head-to-toe comfort. Best of all, Bombas items don't just feel good, they do good, because one purchased equals one donated to someone who needs it. Head over to bombas.com/political and use code political for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/political, code political at checkout. bombas.com/political and use code political. The Supreme Court has made a series of emergency decisions. I guess they don't
grants
call them
of emergency
decisions.
relief. Do you like that?
They do call them emergency decisions. Little or no explanation that have broadly buttressed the Trump administration's efforts primarily to kind of disassemble or change the federal government. Without any deep explanation, the court has stopped judicial holds on Trump's effort to remove heads of independent agencies. They've stopped judicial holds on the Trump administration's attempts to abolish birthright citizenship. They've stopped judicial holds on the Trump's effort to fire thousands, tens of thousands of federal employees. In the most recent example, the court allowed the firing of thousands of education department officials to proceed on the grounds that this is the kind of personnel decision that the executive should be allowed to make. And more or less did not take seriously the argument that he was effectively setting out to destroy a congressionally authorized cabinet-level agency. The court's conservative justices have not explained their reasoning in these cases within the majority. The liberal justices have objected at length in dissents on occasion. But it seems clear the conservative justices are sympathetic to the idea that the president has sweeping powers to run the executive branch as he sees fit. And they're not really interested in the kind of what I would be really interested in if I were a conservative justice, in the unscramble the egg arguments that, like, you preventing the president from taking actions that can't be undone if he ultimately loses on the merits is important. That if it's something he's going to lose on the merits, that you don't want him to do something that basically irrevocably breaks something. So, Emily, broadly speaking, why are all these cases getting to the Supreme Court? We're accustomed to the Supreme Court. You know, you have these arguments. It's all very stately. Stately, exactly. It's very pompous, and then there's a decision issued and a dissent, and it's all written up.
I think you mean the word deliberative is the word you're looking for.
Yes,
there.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But they, and it's all written up, and it's in these elaborate law books and Westlaw, and that's where the Supreme Court happens. So how did we end up in the situation where there's all this stuff that's happening kind of on the side, where the Supreme Court has a black market in decisions?
Yeah. I mean, one term for this has been the shadow docket because of the lack of full briefing and argument, and then often the lack of explanation. When you go back to the 16 years of George W. Bush and Barack Obama, you have 8 grants of emergency relief total in those 16 years. These stats are from Stephen Vladeck, the Georgetown law professor who wrote the book called The Shadow Docket. Then you see a ramping up during Trump's first term. You see, a bunch of requests in some high-profile cases from the Biden administration for grants of emergency relief. For example, when Biden's order about freezing student loan payments was blocked by a district court, the Biden administration asked for emergency relief, did not get it. Then you see the Trump administration come in the second time, and obviously there's been this huge flurry of executive orders and lots of district court orders blocking those executive orders from going into effect. And that's where this big bump comes from. So these numbers, I'm not totally sure they're exactly right, but there have been about 20 requests for grants from emergency relief from the Trump administration, I think since March. And it looks to me like the court has granted almost all of them, including the last 16. So that's a lot of pro-Trump rulings. Now, it's not that the number in itself is necessarily a problem, right? Because the Trump administration is being very selective in which cases it asks for appeals. Like 20 is a lot, but if you look at all the rulings against them, there have been many more than that. However, when you don't explain why you are ruling for the Trump administration over and over again, and people can look at the record under Biden and see a different kind of response from the court, then you look like you're putting a thumb on the scale for, one president over another. And lo and behold, it's a conservative Republican appointed majority doing that for a Republican president. So one thing that is surprising to me about this whole pattern is that especially Chief Justice John Roberts, who cares a great deal about the court's public image, is not more troubled by this, right? It's a procedural problem, a beef with the court. And I don't really understand why he's tolerating that. Now, I will also say that because these orders are unsigned, it's possible that Roberts is quietly dissenting from some of these decisions, and we don't even know that, right? Because sometimes there's a public written dissent from all three of the liberal justices or one or two of them. And it could be that there's like another vote against this in chambers from Roberts, but there's no record of it. And that in itself is part of the problem, right? Like one of the main reasons that courts have legitimacy is that they give reasons for what they're doing. That's like how they show their work. That's how we can tell whether the arguments are persuasive. And they're also leaving district courts kind of holding the bag here in terms of actually following their guidance because it doesn't exist.
So why, given all of that, does he allow this to continue? Is he just overrun?
I mean, I think he probably is overrun. I don't know because this is all happening inside the court. I mean, I think also if you think the district courts have kind of run amok, right, in blocking the president, then this is what you do to do something about it. And, one of the issues here has to do with the way the Supreme Court is expanding the authority of the president.
Right. Thank you.
Hugely. And we should talk about that. I'm happy to talk more about that. Another way this matters, though, is the Supreme Court is expanding its own authority over the district courts because, right, in the normal course of affairs, what happens is somebody shows up in district court and says, hey, no, stop. This is illegal. What the president's trying to do, no. And the district courts, hold a hearing. It all happens quickly because that's what emergencies are. They're supposed to be resolved quickly. And then the district courts enter what's called a temporary restraining order. And that just puts a pause on the law from going into effect. If the Supreme Court steps in and then takes away that temporary restraining order, then the law goes into effect. And so what we're really talking about, and David, you alluded to this earlier, is what happens in the basically 2 years it takes to litigate this challenge on the merits. Is the law going to go into effect or in the meantime, or is it going to be blocked? Is the status quo before Trump's order going to remain in effect? And the standard that the courts are supposed to use, and this is supposed to be the Supreme Court as well, is whether the party that they're ruling for is likely to win on the merits. So who's going to win on the end, kind of gaming that out, even though you don't have everything in front of you. And is there irreparable injury to one side or the other? And then there's this third idea of balancing the equities, which is kind of vague and a little, or a lot subjective. And what seems to be happening, if you look at the pattern of this jurisprudence, is that the court is really only thinking, or is almost all thinking, about the likelihood of success on the merits. And also has the idea that if the government can't do what it wants to do, that is a form of irreparable injury. And so it seems like the standard is kind of shifting, but they're not explicit about that either. And so that is also a problem because that leaves the district courts trying to do some guesswork about how they're supposed to be analyzing these cases without clear guidance, again, from the Supreme Court.
I don't think it is trivial. The argument that stopping the president from doing what he wants to do is an irreparable injury is not a trivial argument. I think you can make a really strong case. The president is elected. They are the executive. They need to have some broad authority to do what they want. And so the president can suffer an irreparable injury in the same or in some way, just as an agency can suffer an irreparable injury by being dismantled.
Or the people who rely on that agency.
Right.
And just to support that for a minute, another way to think about this is like if it is unlawful to stop the president from doing what he wants, like that's bad and courts shouldn't do that and they shouldn't overreact because it's Trump.
Right. That said, the piece of this that's been shocking to me, John, is that a lot of these cases fundamentally come back to Congress's has taken an action. And the president is saying sort of unilaterally, I am undoing that action. So Congress created the Department of Education. And now Trump has said, I'm going to abolish the Department of Education, which he does not have the authority to do. I'm going to abolish it by basically just firing everyone who works there and reassigning any tasks that I think are still worth doing to somebody else. Now, it appears to me that Congress has a very strong interest in stopping him from doing that because this is their legislation. Similarly, there are people who are congressionally appointed to independent agencies who have now basically lost their jobs. They no longer can be the delegate to an independent agency because Trump said, no, these independent agencies all work for me. And yet Congress is not acting in any way to vindicate its interests here. Do you think that would matter if there was a democratically led Congress that was sort of filing complaints about this? Do you think that would make any difference with the justices?
Well, Emily, you can help me with this. I mean, you can imagine it both ways. So let's imagine there was an actual response from the leadership in Congress, because as we'll talk about in the rescission conversation, one of the amusing parts of the rescission conversation is the Republicans have said, we're really unhappy with the way that the Office of Management and Budget is not telling us anything about how they're going to reduce this funding, or they're not being specific at all. And to punish them for doing that, we're going to give them exactly what they want. I mean, there is the Congress is not doing much to restrain the actions of the executive. So let's imagine Democrats are in control and they go crazy and say you can't step on these prerogatives. Which would be the historic response from Congress, which is, how dare you even think about it? My favorite example of this is when Teddy Roosevelt tried to create efficiency in his presidency. Congress stopped him from even being able to ask the questions about whether there were efficient operations in the executive branch, because they saw it as a stepping over his powers. But you could imagine if Democrats were in control and were asking all these questions, that the justices would say, well, that's the way it's supposed to work, that the branch that's being trampled on by the executive should get up on its hind legs and do what it needs to do to reassert its power. And keep him from doing this. And that's the battlefield in which this should take place, not in the courts. Emily, is that plausible?
I mean, I think a lot of lower court judges who are dealing with these challenges strongly feel Congress's absence, right? I mean, when I was reporting the story that I wrote about the district court, the frontline court in Washington, D.C., that was a theme I heard a lot from judges there and elsewhere. They were saying, it looks like this is the judiciary pitted against the president. But in fact, our job is to interpret and apply the laws that Congress passed. Like, we are looking at this statutory text. It says, let's take the Department of Ed example, because it's a great one, as you guys were pointing out. It says that there is such a thing as the Department of Education. We have established it, and it has a bunch of duties that this law lays out. And if you fire more than half the employees, including like every single person in, a crucial part of the agency, they cannot carry out those duties anymore. And so we have to say, like, you're not allowed to do that, Mr. President. But what the judges would vastly prefer would be for these fights to be taking place in the political realm among democratically elected officials. So there is a way in which the government is a three-legged stool, right? We have three branches. And if one of the branches disappears, it looks like it's the only remaining non-presidential branch, i.e. the judiciary, that is like standing up to the president. But in fact, all they're doing is it's their job to try to stand in for Congress. They would like Congress to be the one standing in for Congress. It's
like a unicycle, the unitary. I mean, instead we're a unicycle, which is that you have it.
Yes.
And because I think there's also this. Courts are fundamentally defensive. Courts cannot create. The court cannot allocate funds. The court cannot pass laws. It can only defensively sort of do things and require the other branches to follow what it says or try to ask the other branches to follow
They can't even enforce their own orders. They don't have an army, as everyone likes to remind.
And I think that there is this, with the absence of Congress and Congress's unwillingness to act, you basically default to a situation where you have an executive, and the executive has the advantage of energy and forward momentum and movement and action and doing things. And then you have a court that is attempting to respond. And if it stops it, then it's a negative force, and like that Trump attacks it rhetorically. But it also has no positive energy. And the only other positive energy that can come in government can come from, at national government level, can come from Congress, and Congress will not act. And therefore, you end up with a situation where you basically end up with an executive dictatorship, which is where we're headed, because we have a Congress which is essentially abandoned, a la Roman Republic, its obligations, and that's a really bad world for us to be in, and it's really depressing.
And when you look at the Supreme Court's shadow or emergency docket, the Department of Education case is one of several examples of the Supreme Court deciding to basically like aid and abet the dynamic of expanding presidential power that you were just talking about, right? So this is a tricky thing for the courts in this sense. So Trump said that he wanted to abolish the Department of Education. He said it during the campaign and after he was elected. The order that he signed is in part called closing the Department of Education. The other part is returning authority to the states, right? And Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, talked about this order as the first step on the road to shutdown of the agency. However, in court, the Justice Department, the Solicitor General, defended the legality of this action by saying, but the order itself only says that we're going to make staff reductions to the maximal extent that's allowed by law. And so that means that what we're doing is perfectly legal here. So why did the Supreme Court go along with that explanation when the lower court said, well, wait a second, it's really easy to see here that the true intention of this executive order is to shut down the agency? Well, that's a big question mark. We don't know why the Supreme Court thinks this is okay. And this is a particular problem. Bear with me because this is slightly technical, but the Solicitor General, the Justice Department official who makes the arguments in front of the Supreme Court, John Sauer, he gave 3 reasons why he thought the district court order was wrong. One had to do with standing, who gets to come to court. One had to do with what's called subject matter jurisdiction, like can the court hear this case at all, any court, or the district court. And the third had to do with the merits of the case. And we have no idea which or more than which of those 3 bases the Supreme Court thinks is the right answer. So now what happens? Like, do a different group of plaintiffs need to show up and bring another lawsuit like after the order goes into effect and people actually lose services? Like, what is the answer here? And how are other district courts around the country supposed to look at other cases about, staffing cuts and funding? It's all just like a giant black box.
You mean the court could, sorry to interrupt, but like the court could agree with the plaintiffs on the merits, and they could agree, but they're like, oh, but you don't have standing. And so they need to do is like find a different person to sue, and they would win going forward, right? But they can't. Maybe. But they don't know it.
Right?
I mean, it's not the case. But
no, it might be the case. It may truly be the case. And so then you just have everyone kind of groping around. And then the other thing that I think is a real problem for the, image of the court and the idea that the court is nonpartisan and objective is that during the Biden administration, the Department of Education, we talked about this, like there was the student debt relief, and the district court blocked that order from going into effect. And the Biden administration said, Supreme Court, please let us freeze these loan payments. And the Supreme Court said no. And then it took, months and months for Biden's plan to actually go into effect. So it looks like very differential treatment in these 2 matters affecting the Department of Education. No, maybe it's not. Maybe the Supreme Court has like a principled way of thinking about this that would, reassure us all about their great legal reasoning, but we do not know what it is. And it does not help for other people to kind of try. Like, I find myself in reading and thinking about this, like, well, wait a minute. Well, maybe they were thinking this, and that would be,
yes.
But like, I shouldn't be like trying to supply the rationale that makes it all square.
Right. Invent a can opener.
Love espresso, drip coffee, and cold brew? With the Ninja Luxe Cafe, if you can crave it, you can brew it. Espresso, balanced. Drip coffee, rich. Cold brew in a flash. With Barista Assist technology, you brew with no stress and no guesswork and make perfect silky microfoam hands-free from dairy or plant-based milks. Shop the Ninja Luxe Cafe at ninjakitchen.com.
This episode is brought to you by Built. Built is the perfect rewards program for those looking to earn airline miles and hotel points just by paying rent on time. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/gabfest. That's joinbilt.com/gabfest. Make sure to use joinbuilt.com/gabfest to sign up for Built today.
This episode is brought to you by Planned Parenthood Federation of America. You've seen the headlines. The Trump administration is attacking sexual and reproductive health care. It's the kind of big, urgent topic that deserves more than just cocktail chatter. But Planned Parenthood Federation of America's commitment to care never stops, no matter what. Planned Parenthood health centers are still here, providing compassionate, affordable, and judgment-free care for everyone. Some lawmakers are trying to end abortion access, slash funding people rely on for care, and shut down Planned Parenthood health centers. These attacks only deepen the healthcare crisis they created, putting millions at risk. But here's the truth. Planned Parenthood has been there for over a century because of supporters like you. With your commitment, they can keep defending the care people need, whether it's birth control, cancer screenings, abortion, gender-affirming care, or sex education. Planned Parenthood believes everyone should have the freedom to make decisions about their own bodies, no matter what. And that's something worth fighting for. When freedoms are at risk, what you do during pivotal moments matters most. Join the fight for health and rights by making a gift to support Planned Parenthood at plannedparenthood.org/defend.
Let's do a quick survey.
Bing bong.
Who knew the word rescission before this year? Raise your hand if you knew the word rescission before this year. John Dickerson raised his hand. Emily Bazelon and David Plotz.
Maybe, I feel like maybe
it's not recession. It's not recession. You knew recession.
Also, is it rescission or rescission?
Or rescission. Good question. Also, what's the verb? Do you resist something?
Oh, no. You don't think it's
you rescind.
I think we all knew the word rescind.
Oh, rescind is the verb is rescind. When you rescind something, it's rescission.
I think that has to be right.
Not rescind.
Like rescission?
Rescindment.
Rescindness? No.
Huh. Okay. John Dickerson.
You have rescinded it.
Rescinded. I'm a rescindite. What is rescission? Why has it come up not very much in our lifetime? Maybe one other time in our lifetime.
The rescission process was created to kind of regain control during the Nixon years, when Nixon used the impoundment power, or basically just refused to spend money that Congress had allocated or appropriated, I should say. So the rescission process was created to kind of put things back in balance. So the president can withhold budget authority for a period of time, and that's why there's a deadline on this rescission package, and Congress can weigh in through a rescission bill to either approve the rescission within that period of time or not. And so this is a hangover from the 1974, I think, law. What is new here is the worldview that rescission is kind of a possibly ongoing process. In other words, this was a rescission that had this specific deadline, but seems every indication that the White House is going to keep doing this, which is to say keep not spending congressionally appropriated funds for congressionally appropriated purposes or congressionally authorized purposes. And based on the response to this, it seems pretty likely that they're going to be able to keep doing it. Senator Wicker is quoted in, I think, a Politico article saying,
this is a bad idea, but I'm voting for it anyway. This is a very bad idea.
Right. I thought it was sort of cleverly written. It was like, we really don't want them to be doing this, he said before voting for it. And that's, as we were talking about earlier, this is a one more handing over of power from Congress to the executive.
Okay, let's just to hit the details. So the president basically said, I don't want to spend about $9 billion on
foreign aid,
famine relief, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is about $1 billion of that $9 billion. The House said, okay, you don't have to spend it. We passed a rescission bill not long ago, a couple of weeks ago. And then it went to the Senate, and the Senate has now voted on it. And they made a few small changes. They restored $400 million for PEPFAR, and they allegedly got a commitment to protect some tribal radio stations.
Which the tribal broadcast chief says is not helpful.
Yeah, and also it's not really clear they got the actual commitment. They got sort of like a language that somebody told them, yes, we'll take some Green New Deal money, which is not even a thing, and give it to these radio stations. But
not even a thing in that the Green New Deal doesn't really exist as authorizing legislation.
And there's no mechanism to have it go in this direction.
Anyway, but they did. But the Senate early on Thursday morning passed this rescission, which now has to go back to the House because it was modified by the Senate. But the House will presumably pass it, and the president will stop the funding for international aid, foreign famine relief, various health relief, and effectively defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting starting in October. So, John, if these senators are so opposed, why did they go ahead and vote for it?
Because the president said it was a priority for him and that he would withhold his endorsement from anybody who didn't support his rescission package. And what does that mean more broadly? Imagine you are a senator whose constituent says to you, why didn't you do what the president wanted? We've got a massive debt and deficit. And you basically have to make an argument about doing things the right way through the congressional authorizing process. And versus a president who is saying, I'm trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, we should obviously hasten to add that this is a tiny little drop in the bucket. It is way, 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 way less than DOGE, which is the author of these cuts or partial author of these cuts, ever claimed they could find. And I'll also talk about the merits of these programs, which were in the past conceived of as an element of U.S. soft power. You can talk about the waste of the tons of food that are essentially now going to have to be destroyed as a result of some of these programs ending, that we're going to go to aid other countries. But essentially, this is the way the president teed it up. And in his party, Epstein notwithstanding, you got to have a really good reason to buck the president. And they don't have that good reason.
But unlike a lot of things, this is a democratic process. The House and Senate went ahead and voted with majorities to do this. So
yeah, I mean, there's a bright side to this in terms of the separation of powers, right? One was previously inveighing against DOGE and these executive orders for being this huge grab of presidential power. Well, now the president went to Congress and said, will you go along with this or not? And Congress said, yes. And that, from the point of view of just purely a separation of powers position, is a good thing for the American system. Now, the idea that Trump has so much sway over Congress that senators and maybe representatives too, who are Republicans who think this is a terrible idea, are voting for it anyway, maybe not so great, right? And also, the normal way that Congress normally keeps tabs on agency spending is through subcommittees and hearings where they have like really detailed charts about how they're appropriating money. And one thing that is missing from this process is like which lines are getting X'd out. They've basically handed over all that discretion to the Office of Management and Budget, and they have no idea what's really going to happen. So in that sense, it's not good for the separation of powers because it is Congress willingly taking a vote to give over its own authority.
And you're totally right in terms of you would, if you were defending the separation of powers, you would rather a system in which there is an actual vote in Congress as opposed to one in which the president essentially says, I'm not spending this money and you can't stop me. And then it has to go through the courts, and we have that whole rigmarole that we talked about in the previous topic. On the other hand, one needs to have a new definition of separation of powers if the support from the majority party, the president's party, is so automatic that it's not effectively an independent act. It's essentially a rubber stamp for the president, and there's plenty of evidence that that's the case here.
It's really grim that it took an act of special pleading to save PEPFAR funding, because arguably PEPFAR is the program that has done the most good for the most people in our lifetime. There's like a strong case that probably it is, as a public health initiative, it's been astonishingly effective, and it's crazy that we were going to defund it. It's also crazy that I think it's still unclear, at least when I last read, whether the Global Vaccine Initiative is being funded, which is also an incredibly effective use of public health money, but whatever.
And also remember that because of Trump's executive order, there already were interruptions in these funding streams that have affected services around the world, right? Like it's much easier to destroy things than to create them. And so when you have these interruptions, these like stop work orders and unpaid bills, that's like has a real world impact.
Yeah. But it's a real world impact on people who don't like live in Kansas. So probably the most high profile of these rescindments, these rescissions, is of course Corporation for Public Broadcasting. $1 billion for the next 2 years has now been taken away, which means that PBS and NPR will indirectly suffer, and that radio stations and TV stations that are public radio and public TV stations around the country are going to suddenly have access to significantly less money. And it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In some rural places, the TV stations will be losing half of their funding or even more. In a place, a big city which has a very prosperous, well-supported local public radio station, it might be 5% of its funds. But it is pretty clear that public media is going to be significantly damaged. I suspect that PBS and NPR broadly will survive in some fashion, but that public media, especially at the local level, is going to be quite different. Emily, is that a big deal? I mean, does that matter? Is it, we have a very different news environment than we did when the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was created about 50 years ago. Is this a role for the national government to be funding this kind of media when there's so much other media that is being funded, including so much other, quite good media that's being funded and is available to people in all sorts of forms?
What troubles me about this are the rural parts of the country that have very little local radio without the local NPR affiliate. And those are places that are not well positioned to raise a lot of money from their listeners in the way that, NPR stations in like New York and DC and maybe even Connecticut are going to be able to do.
Maybe even impoverished Connecticut. Maybe even Connecticut, exactly. The richest state in America. I think you can manage it.
The Fairfield County part of Connecticut is easily situated to raise lots of money, I would say. But in any case, forget about that. That's boring. The idea that you're going to leave these pockets of the United States in which it is difficult to do local reporting. Like there's, rural areas, these like big swaths of America where they're sparsely populated and it is hard to do this work. And those are the places that are going to suffer, which of course are like red parts of the country that vote for Republicans. And so, if there is a real problem with the loss of news in those communities, you would hope that people would connect the dots and think about it the next time there's an election and they can weigh in on it. But like so many ways in which government services, or in this case, like media that has some government funding, deteriorate, one wonders whether people are going to exactly connect those dots, or it will just seem like another kind of breakdown that's happening that is beyond people's control.
John, why did protection of public media, which has been pretty bipartisan for decades, collapse? Why did the senators who usually end up protecting it, Republican senators usually end up protecting it, decide no longer worth the fight?
Well, because again, the president, specifically on the question of public media, said he would not endorse people. So you're going up. You're not just. It's no longer just about the merits of the individual funding. It's now about whether you are going to support this. I'm speaking in voice now. Woke, liberal organ, or you're going to support your president. So it's a pretty. In an environment where there's a lot of passion and unfocused, or maybe focused rage at anybody who bucks the president, who wants to take that on, and so it's not a hill to die on for any Republican in the majority.
Yeah, the hill to die on is an interesting one. I was thinking like this is a hill I would die on. I feel like if you look at healthy modern democracies, most of them have publicly funded media of some sort, often of extremely high quality. Like extremely high quality, you'll often find in countries that are prosperous and democratic and well run, there is a public media that operates largely independently and is often very good. And is that a chicken or egg? Is that a cause or an effect of it? And I suspect it's some of both, that rich countries do this, but also that the act of having a public media and a policing public media and a media that is kind of independent and uncorruptible and is widely recognized as having legitimacy is very good broadly for democratic society. And it is a shame that we do not have that. And it's a shame that it is. I'm not sure that PBS and NPR were that, but it is a bummer that we are abandoning any effort at it.
Well, and also you could change the way the funding for PBS and NPR works. You could have more of it go directly to these local stations so they could produce more of their own programming. Because the complaints about, elitism and liberal bias in the programming are about what comes out of the media centers, right? They're about like the shows that are produced in Washington and New York. And like, I get that. I have to say, as a listener, even in Connecticut, I sometimes am like, why am I hearing over and over again about these same subjects? And I would much rather have more really good local coverage and local storytelling. So I'm sympathetic to that part of it. But as usual with the Trump administration, it's like a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. And so you don't get reform and change and like thoughtful repositioning. You just get like axing.
If you could take all of the energy that has been poured into this $9 billion and aimed it where the real questions and the real hard decisions need to be made about budgeting. And this is a small amount that doesn't get at the large drivers of the debt and deficit problem. And there's no interest in the majority in handling any of those difficult questions. And so there is this massive mismatch between all of the passion surrounding this and the place that could actually benefit from having passion and attention put towards it, which is if you really care about the size of the budget deficit, which the people making these cuts say they care about. So it's just one more instance, the same with the president's tax and spending plan, where there is just this massive mismatch between the problem that needs to be addressed and the problems that are actually being addressed, or the issues that are being addressed.
Right. Or the fact that, the president this week, I was just thinking like, oh, what's the topic we should have talked about this week? It's obviously Jerome Powell. It's obviously the Fed. If the U.S. gets rid of an independent Fed chair, it will just be an own goal of enormous stupidity and consequence for generations. Like the fact of an independent central bank is an unbelievably important part of America's strength and our economic strength and our economic legitimacy. And here you have Trump is just toying with the idea of getting rid of it, and in this casual, half-assed way, endangering one of the fundamental foundations that makes the economy work. And yet there should be panic in the streets about that. Let's go to cocktail chatter. When the panic in the streets is too much and you go inside for a quiet cocktail, Emily Bazelon, what are you going to be chattering about to your fellow Bazelons?
So I had an amazing trip to Alaska in the last couple of weeks where I had never been. And Alaska completely fulfilled my expectations of being bigger and wilder than than the rest of the country. And it was really amazing. So I went on a 4-day kayaking trip, which I would totally recommend, the guides that we had and the outfitter. So if anyone wants more information on that, you can find me and email me and I'll send you stuff. And what I wanted to chat about in particular was the second part of the trip was backpacking. And the base for it was this town called McCarthy, which is in what's called the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve, which is like the biggest national park in the country, which I had never heard of in my life. It has also some of the highest mountains in the country, but because it's not Denali, the very highest, I had also never heard of any of those peaks. So it was an amazing trip. And McCarthy, this town, so it's at the end of, it is rural Alaska, and it's the end of a 60-mile dirt road. And then you have to cross a footbridge. You have to walk in unless you live there. And I got kind of fascinated by a podcast about McCarthy that I listened to afterward called the Out There podcast. And what it's about is this like super remote place where people started buying property like in the 70s or 80s to just like get away from it all. And in the winter, at least in that period, and I think this is probably still basically true, there are like 20 or 30 people who spend their winters in McCarthy in these houses or cabins they've built. And, you know, they're like really out there, as the name of the podcast gets across. And I really liked this show for just like interviewing these people about why they had gone there, how they try to build community, like just what it's like to be so far away. So I recommend that wholeheartedly. And I guess the one other thing I'll say about this is that the reason McCarthy exists at all is that there was this big copper mine starting around 1910 called the Kennecott Mine, which is now like a ghost mine and a ghost town in itself. It's like near McCarthy. They somehow built this whole railroad to get the copper out. And that's like its whole own tale of its own. And anyway, so I will stop going on about this history, but it was pretty fascinating to visit.
Yeah, Mount St. Elias is the second tallest mountain in North America at 18,000 feet.
Exactly. And if you, parachute into the middle of this wilderness, you will get to see it. And it is majestic and beautiful. And thank God it was a sunny day, the day that we had a good view of it.
John Dickerson.
Well, I hesitate to do this chatter because mostly I spend my time trying to throw my phone as far away from me as possible to reclaim some of my attention and focus and peace in the world. However, when I was on vacation, somebody I was with had the ISS, the International Space Station app that tracks where it goes, and at the right moment said, hey, it's passing overhead. And so in a very dark night, we looked up in Greece and watched the ISS basically split the sky. And it was amazing to just, think about the astronauts who were up there, to think about how many times it zooms around the world, how many sunsets and sunrises it sees. And it was a transporting moment that was midwifed by, these awful smartphones. And I realized as I was having that moment, how many of these outdoor, this is nothing close to what Emily was describing, which is a true outdoor experience. Also in Greece, there were these birds that were flying in and out of these caves in one of the islands, and they had this beautiful call. And so I used this other app I have, which is called Merlin, which identifies birds, which I quite like doing. And in fact, it turns out that the chimney swifts that are my favorite in because they zoom around our house and they have a beautiful call and they look very cool and they fly really low. The pallid swift, which is apparently somewhat related, but not really related. But anyway, was flying around in Greece. So I realized that between the ISS app, the Merlin bird identifier, picture this, which allows you when you're hiking to identify what that cool looking tree is that you passed, which I don't know if you used that, Emily, but I realized that I'm like, I have a whole bunch of these apps that I rely on to make my time outdoors more, more nourishing. And it may say something a bit shallow about me, but I would recommend any of those to you. You can also do it with the constellations in this flight, the night sky, and also Flight Aware. When a plane zooms over your head, you can see that, oddly enough, there's a direct flight from random airport TK to random other airport, and that those people who would seek to go from such place to place are zooming over your head at that very instant.
My second date with my girlfriend was to watch the ISS fly over DC. I had to fly over in DC one evening.
Nice.
And we watched it. It was lovely. Emily, Mount St. Elias only gets 4.3 stars on Google.
Oh my God. So unfair. So
that's pretty poor.
Yeah,
what did it do? What did it do? Does it not have
inhospitable? Inhospitable was the word I saw.
Well, I wasn't trying to climb it. I was only trying to climb it.
Also, this person gave it 5 stars, but I just wish it were a bit colder. They thought it was too hot.
Oh my God. Can I just really descend from that? I was so cold on parts of this trip.
Yeah. Also 5 stars, climbed this in 5 hours after taking 7 grams of shrooms. Great experience.
Written from inside the hotel room because it turns out it was an entirely hallucinated event.
Wow.
That was fun. But some people did say this mountain is very big and beautiful. So
it is very big and beautiful.
Yeah.
My chatter, normally I'm trivial. This time, John and Emily were trivial, but profound.
We were not trivial. Thank you very much. We were fun and frothy.
Yes, exactly. I mean, people are downloading apps and skipping through the woods.
True. It's absolutely true.
Oh my God. If you want to be serious, you go for it.
Yes, they're looking at the night sky, whereas I am just reading the New Yorker. So my chatter is about an amazing, very alarming story by Dexter Filkins in the New Yorker. Is the U.S. ready for the next war? And it's a really deep story mostly about what's happened in Ukraine and Israel with the changing nature of war. And it's about how drones in particular, but lots of other sort of fast moving, quickly changing tech have altered fundamentally the nature of war. And how badly positioned the U.S. is. The U.S., which has these very long delayed contracts where things are the whole sort of procurement process is very slow, and the technology is often completely out of date by the time it's deployed. How poorly positioned we are for it, and so it's partly a discussion of what interesting things Ukraine and Israel and Russia and China are doing, and then partly an exploration of the company, a company that is trying to upend what is happening in the U.S. military. The company is called Anduril. It's sort of funded by Peter Thiel, and it's run by the guy who created Oculus, this sort of libertarian, crazy tech genius, now 30, and I guess 30, so no longer a kid, named Palmer Luckey. But he's trying to build this next generation of autonomous killing drones for the U.S. And it's a great story. It also points out that in so many aspects of the new military technology, the supply chains have choke points that the Chinese control. And so, for example, all thermal imaging basically is built in China. And so if you need anything which has thermal imaging, which you do, if the Chinese decide you don't get it anymore, you are screwed. So
60 Minutes did a great story on Palmer Luckey. I would like to read...
Palmer Luckey is Matt Gaetz' brother-in-law. He married Matt Gaetz married his sister.
I would like a high-tech entrepreneur with mountains of computing power and servers taking up extraordinary amounts of land to help me successfully log into the New Yorker.
Oh my God! So agree. There's nothing
in a life and death struggle.
Work. It
Oh my God.
It just over and over again kicks me out, no matter how often I pay my bills. It just is unreal, that app. And
I cannot tell.
It, and it is now, I think, worse, or certainly not better.
I cannot tell whether I am engaged in some sort of psychological experiment where somebody is watching me while I have these frustrations, or whether I'm just in a Beckett play, because it is excruciating and it's not cheap.
I have the easiest password in the entire world for my New Yorker subscription, and it doesn't matter. Like, it's the one I remember, but it doesn't matter.
eBaz one.
But the good thing is when you email them, then they don't respond, or you get...
Oh my God. The New Yorker's going to cancel their ad campaign.
Right, exactly. Or they say it's your fault.
Okay. Also, just a second quick chatter, which is that you all have probably heard me talk about. I do a fort tour in Washington, D.C., at Fort DeRussy, this hidden Civil War fort deep in Rock Creek Park. It is, I would note, the highest rated experience on Airbnb in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing place, has an incredible history, really fun. And I just listed a whole bunch of new tours for the fall and winter, I think. So look for the secret fort on Airbnb, or just email me at davidplotz@gmail.com, and I'll connect you. But move fast. Listeners, thank you for sending us your chatters. Please email us chatters@gabfest@slate.com. We could use a resupply, or our supply lines have gotten stretched. We could use some more ones. And our listener chatter this week comes from Matt Gaussman in Oakland.
Hello, Slate Political Gabfest. Long time, second time. My chatter this week is about Wing, a South Korean beatboxer, who some claim might be the best in the world. A few months back, Wing released a video called Dopamine, which quickly amassed 28 million views. This had me questioning my preconceived notions of what the human body is capable of. I'm always blown away how year after year, we humans push our bodies to more and more unthinkable extremes, whether it's a new feat of endurance, a world record in sports, or even, yes, beatboxing. This gives me hope that the best will always be yet to come. In honor of his video's success and as a thank you to his fans, a few weeks ago, Wing released a Dopamine remix video. I honestly can't decide which one I like better. Peace out.
That's all for our episode this week, but we also have a bonus episode in your feed. Summer, what we're reading and watching and thinking about in summer. But that is just for Slate Plus members. Slate Plus members get live discounts to our live shows. They never hit the paywall on the Slate site. They get bonus episodes on Slate podcasts. And so our episode this week, only for members. If you're a member, thank you. If you're not a member, you can subscribe to Slate Plus directly from the Gabfest show page on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit slate.com/Gabfest Plus to get access wherever you listen. That's our show for today. The political Gabfest researcher is Emily Ditto. Our theme music is made by They Might Be Giants. Ben Richmond is Senior Director for Podcast Operations. For Emily Bazelon and John Dickerson, huzzah! I'm David Plotz. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.